The evening sun poured through the kitchen window like melted gold, catching the steam rising from 3 pots on the stove. Adaeze moved between them with the grace of a dancer, her wrapper tied tight around her waist, her feet bare against the cool tiles. The aroma of jollof rice, egusi soup, and fried plantains filled the modest 3-bedroom apartment in Surulere. She was preparing dinner for 8, her husband, his 2 brothers, his sister, his mother, and 3 cousins who had stopped by but would inevitably stay for the meal. They always did. Her hands moved automatically, stirring, tasting, and adjusting. 7 years of marriage had taught her exactly how each of them liked their food. Chaik wanted his jollof slightly burned at the bottom, the way his mother made it. Mama Chaik needed her soup thick enough to require extra swallowing effort. She claimed thin soup gave her heartburn. The brothers preferred their plantains almost black, crispy on the edges. Adaeze had memorized these preferences the way some women memorized Bible verses. It was her love language. But as she worked, she could hear them in the living room, and their words cut deeper than any kitchen knife ever could. I don't know what Chaik sees in that woman. It was Obiageli, Chaik's younger sister, her voice carrying that particular pitch of disdain that only family members perfected. She barely speaks, just hovers around like a ghost.
No personality whatsoever.
Adaeze's hand stilled on the wooden spoon. She'd heard variations of this conversation 1,000 times, but it never stopped hurting. The wound was always fresh. At least she can cook, one of the brothers, Amika, said with a laugh that held no warmth. That's about all she's good for. Chaik married a housemaid who doesn't even get paid. The living room erupted in laughter.
Sharp.
Cruel. Comfortable. They weren't whispering. They weren't even trying to hide their contempt. Why would they? In their minds, Adaeze was less educated, less sophisticated, less valuable. A woman who had trapped their golden boy brother with village charm and home training. They didn't know that Adaeze had a master's degree in business administration from the University of Lagos. They didn't know because she'd never told them, never corrected them, never defended herself.
But why?
The answer was walking through the front door right now. Adaeze Okonkwo, her husband, tall and handsome in his fitted navy suit, briefcase in hand, the smell of expensive cologne announcing his arrival before his voice did. "I'm home," he called out, and Adaeze felt her heart do that stupid flutter it still did after 7 years. She loved him. God help her. She loved him with a desperation that frightened her in quiet moments. She'd loved him since their university days when he'd been a struggling student and she'd been the girl who tutored him through economics. Back then, his smile had been shy, his ambition humble. He'd promised her the world. She'd believed him. And when his family had opposed their marriage, claiming she was below their standard, she'd fought for him, stood by him, married him anyway in a small church ceremony his mother refused to attend. She'd thought love would be enough. She'd thought if she just proved herself through service, through sacrifice, through silent endurance, they'd eventually see her worth. 7 years later, she was still waiting. Adaeze wiped her hands on her apron and stepped into the living room. Chaik was already surrounded by his family, receiving handshakes and backslaps like a conquering hero returning from war. He worked as a senior manager at a logistics company, a position he spoke about with such pride that Adaeze had long stopped mentioning that she'd been the one who'd seen the job posting and encouraged him to apply. "Ada, dinner ready?" Chaik asked without looking at her. Not "hello, my love." Not "how was your day?" Not even eye contact. Just the expectation of service. "Almost my husband," she replied softly, using the respectful Igbo tradition of address. 10 minutes. Mama Chaik, a stout woman whose face seemed permanently set in disappointment, made a show of checking her watch. "And? We've been waiting for over an hour. What kind of wife makes her husband's family wait? In my time, food was ready before the man came home." The room went silent, waiting for Adaeze's response. But Adaeze only smiled, that same gentle, submissive smile she'd perfected over 7 years, and retreated to the kitchen. Let them think she was weak. Let them believe she was nothing. Because the truth was so explosive, so devastating, So utterly unbelievable that if they knew it, this entire family would crumble like a house of cards in a Lagos windstorm. 15 minutes later, the dining table groaned under the weight of the feast Adaeze had prepared. Plates piled high with jollof rice, bowls of steaming soup, platters of meat, fried fish, and plantains. Bottles of chilled malt and soft drinks. Fresh fruit salad for dessert. It was enough food to feed twice their number, and it had cost nearly 50,000 naira. Money Adaeze had quietly withdrawn from her personal account, just as she did every week. Now this is a proper meal, Emeka declared, loading his plate with greedy enthusiasm. Ada, you've outdone yourself. This is why Chike keeps you around, More laughter. Chike joined in, and that hurt worse than his family's mockery. Adaeze sat at the far end of the table, not beside her husband, but in the seat closest to the kitchen, so she could quickly fetch whatever they needed. She'd learned not to eat until everyone was served and satisfied. By then, the food was usually cold and her appetite gone. But she didn't eat for pleasure anymore. She ate to survive. Just like she endured this marriage to survive the hope that someday, somehow, Chike would look at her the way he used to. With love, with respect, with the tenderness he'd promised under that church altar 7 years ago. So, brother, Obinna, the younger of Chike's brothers, said between mouthfuls of food, when are you finally going to give Mama a grandchild? You've been married how long now? 7 years? And still nothing. The table went silent. This was the other favorite topic of family gatherings, Adaeze's apparent failure to conceive. What they didn't know was that she'd been pregnant 3 times. 3 times her body had tried to create life. 3 times she'd miscarried. Once at 12 weeks, once at 8, and the last time at just 6 weeks. Each loss had shattered something inside her. And each time, she grieved alone because Chike had been too busy, too stressed, too focused on his career to sit with her in that darkness. The hospital visits, the recovery, the hollow ache of empty arms. She'd faced it all alone. These things take time, Chike said dismissively, not even glancing at his wife. We're working on it. Working on it. As if pregnancy was a project to be managed. As if her 3 dead babies were simply failed attempts that needed better strategy. Adaeze's fingers tightened around her fork until her knuckles went white. But her face remained serene, peaceful, unreadable, because she'd learned something crucial over these 7 years. The people who underestimate you give you the greatest power. And Adaeze Okonkwo was about to teach them exactly what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. The dinner conversation flowed around her like she wasn't there. They talked about Chike's upcoming promotion prospects, about Emeka's new car, a Toyota Camry he'd just purchased with his hard-earned savings, about Obiagili's daughter who just gained admission to the University of Ibadan with a full scholarship from a generous company program. They talked about the family land in the village that had nearly been lost to creditors but was saved at the last minute by a miracle. They thanked God. They praised each other's resilience. They celebrated their family's good fortune. Not once did anyone look at Adaeze. Not once did anyone say thank you for the meal she'd spent 3 hours preparing. Not once did anyone see her. And that was exactly how she wanted it. Because invisible people see everything. They hear everything. They know everything. And when the time comes, when the mask finally slips and the truth is revealed, invisible people become unforgettable. Adaeze cleared the table in silence, washed the dishes while the family watched TV in the living room, wiped down the counters, swept the floor, and prepared breakfast ingredients for the morning. By the time she finished, it was past 11 p.m. Chike was already in bed, scrolling through his phone, his back to her side of the bed. She climbed in beside him, her body exhausted but her mind racing. 7 years. 7 years of this. How much longer could she endure? But even as the question formed, she knew the answer. As long as it takes. Because Adaeze Okonkwo hadn't survived poverty, loss, and betrayal by giving up easily. She'd survived by being smarter than everyone in the room. And tomorrow, like every day, she'd wake up at 5 a.m., prepare breakfast, send Chike off to work with a smile, and then she'd drive to her real life. The life where she wasn't invisible. The life where she was unstoppable. The life where she was queen.
But tonight?
Tonight, she was just Ada. The perfect wife nobody valued.
And that was fine. For now.
5:47 a.m. The alarm on Adaeze's phone vibrated silently under her pillow. She'd learned long ago not to wake Chaik with sound. She slipped out of bed like a shadow, her movements practiced and precise. In the bathroom, she washed her face with cold water, feeling the exhaustion of last night's performance wash away with the soap. The woman staring back at her in the mirror looked tired. Ordinary. Forgettable.
Perfect.
She dressed in her usual morning uniform, a simple Ankara wrapper and matching blouse, flat sandals, a headscarf tied modestly. The outfit of a traditional Nigerian wife. Breakfast was already prepped from last night, so she only needed to heat the yam porridge, fry some eggs, and slice fresh bread. By 6:30 a.m., Chaik emerged from the bedroom, dressed in one of his tailored suits, navy blue with thin pinstripes, the kind that cost 70,000 naira at the boutique on Victoria Island. Adaeze had bought it for him last month, through cash she'd left in his jacket pocket with a note. From Mama. She said you need to look sharp for that meeting. He believed it, of course. Food is ready, my husband, Adaeze said, gesturing to the dining table she'd set with care. Chaik grunted in acknowledgement, sat down, and began eating while scrolling through his phone. No, good morning. No, thank you. Just consumption. Adaeze poured his tea, 2 sugars, no milk, and placed it beside his plate. I'll be back late tonight, he said without looking up. Board meeting. Might go until 8 or 9. Board meeting. Adaeze almost smiled. She'd scheduled that meeting herself yesterday afternoon during a conference call with the company's CFO and operations director. But Chaik didn't know that. He thought the CEO had called the meeting. He had no idea the CEO had been listening to him complain about her, his wife, during lunch breaks for months. Okay, my husband. I'll keep your dinner warm, she replied, the perfect picture of wifely submission. He left at 7:15 a.m., taking the car, a Mercedes C-Class that he believed was a loan from his older cousin. In reality, Adaeze owned it outright. She owned a lot of things Chaik believed belonged to other people. That's what happens when you pay attention, when you plan, when you think 10 steps ahead while everyone else is still celebrating step 1. The moment his car pulled out of the compound, Adaeze transformed. The headscarf came off. The wrapper loosened. She walked into the bedroom and opened the wardrobe, not Chaik's side, but hers. Behind the modest clothes she wore at home hung a completely different collection. Designer suits from Zara and Mango, silk blouses, tailored trousers, Italian leather heels. She selected a charcoal gray pantsuit with a crisp, white shirt underneath. Professional. Powerful. Perfect. Her makeup was minimal but strategic. Bold red lipstick, sharp eyeliner, a dusting of bronzer. Her natural hair, usually hidden under scarves, was styled in an elegant low bun. When she looked in the mirror again, the transformation was complete. Ada the housewife had disappeared. Adaeze Okonkwo, CEO of Adaeze Global Enterprises, stood in her place. She grabbed her designer handbag, a Prada she kept hidden in the back of her closet, and her car keys. Not the keys to the Mercedes. The keys to her Range Rover Sport, parked 3 streets away in a private garage she rented under a corporate account. This was her routine. Every single day for 7 years. The drive to her office took 40 minutes through Lagos morning traffic. Adaeze navigated the chaos with practiced ease, her mind already shifting through the day's priorities. The expansion proposal for the Abuja branch, the new contract with a Chinese manufacturing firm, the quarterly revenue reports that showed another 12% growth. Adaeze Global Enterprises had started small, very small. 10 years ago, when her father died and left her a modest inheritance of 2 million naira, most people expected her to squander it on a lavish funeral or distribute it to relatives who'd suddenly materialized claiming kinship. Instead, Adaeze had taken that money, combined it with a small business loan, and launched a logistics company with 2 employees and 1 rickety truck. She'd worked 20-hour days, sleeping in the office, eating 1 meal a day, personally loading cargo when drivers didn't show up. She'd been underestimated by every competitor. A young woman in a male-dominated industry? She'd fail within 6 months, they whispered. Within 2 years, she'd acquired 4 more trucks and landed her first major contract. Within 5 years, she'd expanded into warehousing and supply chain management. By year 8, Adaeze Global Enterprises employed over 300 people and operated in 3 Nigerian states. Last year's revenue? 470 million naira. This year was projected to break 600 million. The company's headquarters sat in a gleaming 8-story building in Victoria Island, right in the heart of Lagos's business district. Adaeze parked in her private spot, floor B2, marked only with reserved, and took the elevator to the 8th floor. Her floor. Executive Suite. The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area where her personal assistant, Chidinma, was already waiting with her tablet and the day's briefing folder. "Good morning, Ma," Chidinma greeted with genuine respect. She was one of the few people who knew Adaeze's double life. "Morning reports are ready." The Chinese delegation confirmed for Thursday. "Mr. Okonkwo's performance review is also on your desk. Leave it for now," Adaeze interrupted gently. Chidinma nodded, understanding immediately. Reviewing her husband's work performance was always the hardest part of Adaeze's job. Not because he was bad at his work, Chaik was actually decent at operations management, but because every report reminded her of the gulf between who he thought he was and who he actually was in the company hierarchy. Chaik believed he was a senior manager, reporting to a board of directors. In reality, he was a mid-level operations coordinator. His impressive salary? Adaeze had inflated it by 40%. His recent promotion? Adaeze had created a new position specifically to boost his ego. His company car, his travel allowances, his performance bonuses, all designed to make him feel successful. To make him feel like the provider she'd wanted him to be. But the cruelest irony? Chaik wasn't the only Okonkwo on Adaeze's payroll. Emeka, who'd mocked her last night over dinner, worked in fleet management. His title sounded impressive. Regional Transport Coordinator. The reality? He managed 6 drivers and spent most days playing Candy Crush in his cubicle. His salary of 250,000 naira a month was twice what his actual productivity warranted. Adaeze had inflated it because family. Obinna, the younger brother, worked in the warehouse division. His performance reviews were consistently mediocre, late arrivals, long lunch breaks, missing inventory reports. Any other employee would have been fired within 3 months. But Obinna was still there after 2 years, collecting 180,000 naira monthly. Again, because family. Obiageli, the sister who'd questioned Adaeze's worth, was technically the HR coordinator. On paper. In practice, she forwarded emails, organized the occasional team lunch, and spent hours on personal calls. Her salary? 200,000 naira. For doing what Chidinma could accomplish in 90 minutes. And then there was Mama Chaik's medical bills. The hypertension medication, the monthly specialist appointments, the emergency hospital admission last year when her blood sugar spiked. Total cost over 3 years? Nearly 4 million naira. All paid through the company's family welfare program. A program Adaeze had created specifically to cover her mother-in-law without anyone knowing. Adaeze sat behind her mahogany desk, the Lagos skyline stretching behind her through floor-to-ceiling windows, and opened her laptop. Her morning routine included reviewing all departmental reports, including those from Chaik's division. She read his latest submission, a proposal to optimize delivery routes that would save the company approximately 300,000 naira monthly. It was good. Solid analysis, practical implementation strategy, clear cost-benefit breakdown. This was the Chaik she'd fallen in love with, intelligent, hardworking, capable. This was the man she believed would be her partner in every sense. But then she scrolled down to the email he'd sent to his brother Emeka at 3:47 p.m. yesterday, accidentally copied to the company's shared server. She read it once.
Twice.
3 times, each word a small blade sliding between her ribs. "Guy, I swear I'm tired of this woman. Ada just sits at home doing nothing all day while I break my back at this job. My mother's right. I married the wrong person. Ngozi at reception? Now, that's the kind of woman a man needs." She understands ambition. She knows how to dress. She actually makes me feel like a man, you know? I'm seriously thinking of making some changes. Life is too short to be miserable. Adaeze's hands didn't shake. Her breath didn't catch. 7 years of practice had taught her to absorb pain silently. But something inside her, something that had been cracking for years, finally broke clean through. Ngozi, the receptionist. The girl Adaeze herself had hired 8 months ago after reviewing 43 applications. A 25-year-old with a diploma in secretarial studies and an enthusiasm that had seemed refreshing during the interview. That Ngozi. Her husband was what? Interested? Involved? Already sleeping with her? The email didn't specify, but the tone told Adaeze everything she needed to know. She sat there in her 8th-floor corner office, surrounded by the empire she'd built with her own hands, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, commanding a company worth hundreds of millions. And yet, her husband, the man she'd sacrificed her identity for, the man she'd lifted up while making herself small, was tired of her, thought she did nothing all day, wanted to replace her with a woman who made 17,000 naira a month answering phones. The irony was so sharp it could draw blood. Adaeze closed the laptop, took a breath, then another. Chidinma, she said into the intercom, her voice steady. Clear my calendar for the rest of the week. And book the conference hall for Monday morning. All staff mandatory meeting. All staff, ma? That's over 300 people. Everyone, Adaeze repeated, including the Okonkwos. Especially the Okonkwos. There was a pause on the other end. Chidinma knew. She'd known for years what was coming. Yes, ma, she said quietly. It's time. Adaeze looked out at the Lagos skyline, at the city she'd conquered through sheer will and brilliant strategy. 7 years she'd played this role. 7 years she'd hidden her crown. 7 years she'd waited for love to be enough. Yes, she said finally. It's time. The queen was done pretending to be a pawn, and when she revealed herself, everyone would finally see what they'd been too blind to notice. The woman they dismissed, mocked, and underestimated had been holding all the power all along. She just hadn't decided to use it yet. But betrayal has a way of clarifying things. And Adaeze Okonkwo was nothing if not clear-headed. Let the reckoning begin. It started so small she almost missed it. A new cologne, something expensive and spicy, not the usual musk Chike had worn for years. Adaeze noticed it 3 weeks ago when he came home from work. She'd leaned in for their customary greeting peck, and the scent hit her. Unfamiliar, deliberately seductive. New cologne, she'd asked casually. Oh, this? One of the guys at work recommended it. You like it? He'd barely waited for her answer before moving past her. That should have been her first clue. But Adaeze had pushed it down, swallowed it whole like bitter medicine. Don't be paranoid. Don't be that wife. Then came the phone. Chike had never been possessive about his phone. It usually sat on the dining table during meals, face up, notifications visible. But lately it was always in his pocket. Always face down when he did put it down. Always on silent. And when it buzzed, he'd glance at the screen with an expression Adaeze couldn't quite read. Guilt? Excitement? Both. Who keeps texting you? She'd asked one evening while they watched TV. Work stuff. You know how it is. The group chat never stops. But he'd angled the phone away from her when he typed his response. The screen's glow caught his face, and there it was, a smile. Not the tired, obligatory smile he gave her. A real smile. The kind that reached his eyes and softened his whole face. The kind he used to give her 7 years ago. Adaeze's stomach had twisted into a knot that night, but she'd said nothing. What could she say? Your smile looks too happy? You smell too good? Your phone is too private? She'd sound crazy. Controlling. Exactly like the bitter, suspicious wife Chike's mother always implied she was. So she stayed quiet. Watched. Waited. And the signs kept multiplying like cells in a malignant tumor. The late nights became later. The board meetings became more frequent. The weekend business trips started, to Port Harcourt, to Abuja, to check on the branches. Except Adaeze knew there were no weekend operations at those branches. She knew because she designed the company's operational schedule herself. Those branches were closed on Saturdays and Sundays. Yet Chaik would leave Friday night and return Sunday evening, smelling like hotel soap and bringing back no paperwork, no reports, nothing to show for his inspection tour. "How was the trip?" she'd ask. "Productive. Very productive. We're really scaling up operations."
Lies.
Smooth, confident lies delivered with the ease of practice. Adaeze had access to his company travel expenses. She approved them, after all. The hotel bookings showed 2 guests. The room service charges included champagne and strawberries. The receipts painted a picture she didn't want to see, but couldn't unsee. Still, she needed proof. Something concrete. Something undeniable. Because confronting a cheating spouse without evidence is like going to war without weapons. You know the enemy is there, but you can't land a killing blow. So she waited. And on a Friday evening, 3 weeks after discovering that email about Ngozi, Adaeze made a decision. She would see for herself. Chaik had texted her at 4 p.m. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up for dinner." Standard message. Standard excuse. But today, Adaeze wasn't going to accept it. She'd spent the day at the office managing a crisis, a delayed shipment that had their biggest client threatening to pull their contract. She negotiated, problem-solved, and saved a 12 million naira deal by 3 p.m. She was exhausted, but not too exhausted for this. At 6:30 p.m., Adaeze drove to the office. Not her office. The one where Chaik worked, believing it belonged to someone else. She'd never visited before. Why would she? It would raise too many questions. But today, she had an excuse ready. She'd brought his favorite pepper soup from his preferred local restaurant. A surprise dinner for her hardworking husband.
Wholesome.
Unsuspicious.
Perfect.
The security guard at the gate recognized her, or rather, recognized her face from the few times she dropped Chaik off during his early days. "Madam. Evening o. You day find Oga?"
Yes.
"I brought him dinner. He's working late." The guard's face did something strange, a flicker of discomfort, quickly masked. Oga day inside. 3rd floor. His tone was odd. Careful. Like he was trying to warn her without warning her. Adaze's heart began to pound. She walked through the reception area, noting the empty desk where Ngozi usually sat. The girl's designer handbag, a fake Michael Kors that Adaeze recognized from the market stalls in Balagan, hung on the chair. So she was here, in the building, at 6:30 p.m. on a Friday evening. Working late, apparently. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt like descending into cold water. Each floor that passed increased the pressure in Adaze's chest. What if she was wrong? What if she was about to humiliate herself over paranoia? But what if she was right? The hallway was dim. Most employees had gone home. Only a few offices still showed light beneath their doors. Chaik's office was at the end, corner position, the placement of someone important. Someone valued. The irony wasn't lost on Adaeze. The door was closed but not locked. She could hear voices inside.
Low.
Intimate. A woman's laugh, light, flirtatious, young. Adaze's hand trembled as she reached for the door handle. This was it. The moment of truth. The moment that would either prove her wrong or destroy her marriage. She turned the handle, pushed open the door, and her world exploded into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Chaik was sitting on his desk, not behind it. His tie was loosened, his shirt partially unbuttoned, and between his legs, her arms wrapped around his neck, her lips on his, was Ngozi, the receptionist, the girl Adaeze had hired, the girl who made 17,000 naira a month. They didn't hear the door open immediately, too lost in each other. But when Ngozi's eyes flicked toward the movement and widened in shock, Chaik turned. For a single, frozen second, their eyes met. Husband and wife. Betrayer and betrayed. And in that second, Adaeze saw everything she needed to see. Not shame. Not remorse. Irritation. He was irritated that she'd interrupted. That's what his expression said. Really? Right now? You couldn't have called first? Adaeze. He said her name like it was a problem to be managed. It's not what you think. Those words. Those exact words that every cheater in history has used. As if there was some alternative explanation for why his assistant's lipstick was smeared on his mouth, why her blouse was half unbuttoned, why his hands had been on her waist just seconds ago. It's not what I think, Adaeze repeated, her voice hollow. The pepper soup container slipped from her hands and hit the floor. Hot liquid exploded across the tiles, the smell of spices filling the office. None of them moved to clean it. Ngozi, to her credit, had the decency to look uncomfortable. She stepped away from Chaik, attempting to button her blouse with shaking hands. But there was something else in her expression too. Something that made Adaeze's blood run cold. Defiance. This girl wasn't afraid. Wasn't apologetic. She was confident. Like she'd already won some contest Adaeze hadn't realized she was competing in. Baby, you should leave, Chaik said. Baby. He called her baby. Adaeze had been his wife for 7 years, and he'd never used that term of endearment. Never. We'll talk about this at home, he continued, straightening his clothes with infuriating casualness. This isn't the place. When? Adaeze's voice came out stronger than she felt. When is the place, Chaik? Because you're never home. You're always working late. Always traveling. Always busy. When exactly were you planning to tell me you're sleeping with your receptionist? I'm not just a receptionist, Ngozi interjected, her voice sharp. Bold. Stupid. I'm a woman who knows how to treat a man right. Something you clearly never learned. The silence that followed was deafening. Adaeze looked at this girl, this child, really, barely out of university, who had just insulted her in her own husband's office. Using company property. On company time. The audacity was almost impressive. Almost. Get out, Adaeze said quietly. Excuse me? Ngozi's eyebrows shot up. You heard me. Get out of this office.
Now.
Ngozi looked at Chaik, waiting for him to defend her. To choose her. And God help them both, he did. Ada, you can't just come into my workplace and start giving orders. Your workplace? Adaeze let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it wasn't so broken. Your workplace.
Right.
The job you think you earned. The salary you think you deserve. The promotion you think you achieved through hard work. Your workplace. She turned to Ngozi, seeing her clearly for the first time.
Pretty, yes.
Young, definitely. But ordinary. Completely, utterly ordinary. Nothing special. Nothing extraordinary. Nothing worth destroying a marriage over. You think you've won something, Adaeze said softly. You think you've taken something from me. But you have no idea what you've actually done. No idea what you've started. I know exactly what I've done, Ngozi shot back, emboldened by Chaik's implicit support. I've shown him what a real woman looks like. What a real relationship feels like. You can't even give him children. What good are you? The words hit like physical blows. Each one landed in the softest parts of Adaeze's heart, the parts that still bled from 3 miscarriages, 3 tiny lives lost, 3 failures her body had committed against her will. Her vision blurred. Whether from tears or rage, she couldn't tell. Chaik had the grace to flinch at that comment. Ngozi, that's enough. No, it's not enough. Adaeze's voice cut through the office like a blade. It's nowhere near enough. But it will be. Soon enough, you'll both understand exactly what enough means. She turned and walked out of the office. Down the hallway. Into the elevator. Through the reception. Past the security guard whose eyes were carefully averted. Into her car. And only then, sitting in the driver's seat of her Range Rover, alone in the dark parking lot, did she allow herself to break. The sobs came from somewhere deep. Somewhere primal. 7 years of love, loyalty, and sacrifice shattered in a single moment. The man she'd built up had torn her down. The family she'd secretly supported had mocked her. The company she'd created had become the venue for her humiliation. But as Adaeze cried in that dark parking lot, something else began to emerge from the pain. Something cold. Something hard. Something that had been forged in the fire of betrayal and would emerge as pure, unbreakable steel.